Hello, friends. Welcome to Akulmach Live, and I'm your host, CK. And today we are discussing about AI. This is one of our favorite subject on the channel, and we have a distinguished guest. He does not require introduction. He is very famous. Let me introduce you to our guest. His name is Benny Rubinstein. He's joining us from Israel. He's a former Microsoft global sales leader. He's done many things, wore many hats, and he has been a global leader in the corporate life. He's also the alumnus of Wharton School and Harvard. Currently, he is the founder of BZR or BZR Insights, helping a lot of CEOs world over. And he is also a PhD candidate and research scholar. And his research subject is AI in the healthcare space or medical space. And today we are discussing about balancing data and ethics in the uh, healthcare innovation, and therefore he is the best person to answer some of our questions. So without further ado, let's welcome Benny to our show. Hello, Benny. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank God. Thank you for having me.
Great. So it's always pleasure to talk to you, and such innovative subjects and your research subjects. In fact, last week you also mentioned about releasing of a research paper worldwide. So I think it's very informative, sort of eye opener for our viewers and for us. Um, and today we have a very interesting subject to discuss. That is, how to balance the use of AI in the healthcare space, essentially because there is a lot of data security sharing is required, and also the ethical use of AI. So what are your opening thoughts about this subject?
Yes, thank you so much, CK. Just as a parenthesis, I got a few people asking me about the paper. It's in production with Springer Nature. I hope that next week when we talk, it will already be live for everyone. And I'll share a link as soon as I get. Yeah. So about the topic today, I'm actually very happy to be here. It's probably one of the most complicated and crucial discussions we have in the healthcare AI space. It came out as a kind of a section on the paper that I published, my systematic literature review, but there is extensive research on that field. Just to summarize, obviously, the aspect of dealing with data is very crucial for artificial intelligence systems. That said, the kind of data that we're talking about here, for example, patient data, right, your medical history, etc., is something that's not just your patient health records, but electronic health records from hospitals, providers. I mean, that's clearly very sensitive information there, and there is some pretty nasty consequences if you actually have a breach or any disaster happen and people have access to it who shouldn't. So it's complex. It's at the core of it. And one comment, and obviously we're talking about the ethical issues in a bit. I won't elaborate too much now, but the one maybe sentence that I would like maybe people to think about is, in this complex scenario, there is no like perfect silver bullet solution, but it's important to remember that while it's super important to make sure privacy, security, all these ethical matters are taken care of, if you go on an extreme and you want 100% certainty, which doesn't exist in reality, you also have to pay a price on the innovation side. So innovation requires some sort of calculated risks. Obviously, we need to be very responsible and be very aware of the risks and have a plan in place. But I just wanted to say, in innovation, there is no innovation if there is no sharing, if there is no data access. So the question is how you do that, because obviously if you don't, you can't get much further.
So Benny, just to recap for our viewers, can you also tell us how the AI is currently being used or utilized in patient care, and what are the most promising advancement or achievements of AI in the patient care space specifically?
Yes, absolutely. So I will enumerate a few of them, the ones that are more prominent, both in the academia as well as in the business world. And then I'll maybe mention some of the emerging ones. One is there that I'm researching now. So I think the most let's say established ones, the are clearly on the diagnostic imaging and analysis, right? So since my time in Microsoft Research, which was over 10 years ago at the Health Solutions Group, we were working with many partners, Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic. We'll talk about some of them later. But this is an area where it's a really great fit. If you look at the advancements in technology, we have a great computing power and capabilities to actually use computer vision, which is one of the fields in AI, to basically help, for example, radiologists and other specialists in automating or some sort of workflows for radiological use, right? So there's many studies that actually show there are some AI algorithms that even met or exceeded human expert performance in doing those image-based diagnoses. And this is across many specialties: radiology, dermatology, pathology, cardiology, etc. There are many advanced AI tools, we'll talk about some of them later, that can now analyze CT scans, X-rays, MRIs, and any other images to detect lesions or anomalies that human radiologists could actually miss. So that's one of the, I would say, more established areas. Another area that is sort of emerging, and it's really revolutionary, I would say, is drug discovery and development. We might talk more about that later, but just to give you a flavor, I mean, the estimates, and we have many studies that prove that AI has the potential to reduce just a drug discovery timeline from something like 10 to 20 years, which is kind of an average in the industry today, down to maybe 4 to 6 years with some associated cost savings, eventually much even less than that. So it's a significant improvement. There are other things happening there as well. A third area is clinical decision support, which is sort of more in the neighborhood of where my research goes around, which is really not replacing doctors, obviously, but using AI to enhance the clinical decision-making processes. So with AI, you can analyze patient data and you can detect very early warning signs, both, for example, in mental health, it's being used these days, as well as in some other areas, to streamline this kind of acute care journey. So I probably won't go too long. It's a very long list, but I wanted to call out precision medicine. It's something that's been mentioned a while back in several papers and in some really great books, one of them by Peter Lee, the head of Microsoft Research. So really the idea of think about rare diseases. There is very little economic incentive to do much deeper research on diseases that occur in a small percentage of the population. But if that person happens to be, God forbid, your son or someone in your family, you definitely want to get a better outcome. And I know personally a lot of people who are doing that. So there's a lot of advancements with AI to kind of drive a more precise care plan for diseases that are less known, or there's less knowledge or drugs for that. So there's a longer list. I think I probably will pause here. We can talk later. There's clinical trials. There is a lot of advancements on the administrative part, not on the medical part, but a lot of the time spent today is with billing systems and all that. So there's a lot of improvements there as well to reduce those costs and make them more efficient. And last but not least, something that I was doing in Microsoft Research a while back, and it's becoming more and more prevalent, which is the remote patient monitoring, right? Ideally, the hospital of the future, as used to have at the Microsoft Executive Briefing Center at the time, may look amazing, but the real amazing thing is when you don't have to actually go to the hospital, right? That would be the best thing. And there's a lot of things that, like the areas that I worked at the time with chronic conditions like diabetes, you can actually use AI today to monitor through devices and do a lot of things without having to actually leave your premises. So very good for elderly population, for patients with dementia, other people that just have more difficulty in actually going into a healthcare center physically.
Well, Benny, I have some additional questions. Maybe we can talk about it very briefly. Some of these conditions are very chronic. Like, for example, there are cancer, which is quite scary to most people who actually get cancer. And then there are new age diseases like corona, and then HMBV. Now we are hearing that mostly in China today, but it has a potential to grow in other parts of the world, and in future there could be something else. So is there a process that AI can help us fighting or improving immunity of the human mankind? Is there a some sort of program running? I mean, in your research, did you find that out?
Yeah, frankly, I think the answer is yes. It is a little bit beyond the scope of my research, but I did come across, I mean, that falls more into the genomic space. There is quite a lot of things being done that. There is some real severe ethical dilemmas that need to be dealt with in society. But theoretically, yes, there's a whole field of study around longevity, and some of them might involve genomics. So there are some things there that can be done scientifically or today, some that we'll be able to do. You're probably familiar with CRISPR and all those things. I mean, they exist today. The question is, how much do we want to kind of control or regulate that, or give people more freedom to use that? Those are more complex things we need to deal with.
All right, so let's move on. And I think the whole usage of AI is regarding the data. You mentioned several types that the analytics are much more better if you use AI, and in pathology and in many other patient data, etc. So what are the specific type of patient data that are crucial for AI to function effectively? Because you mentioned diabetes, so it's this sugar levels in the, basically blood sugar levels. But is there anything else that can be tracked while monitoring diabetes? So likewise, for different diseases, there could be different types of data, health related data. So what can be suitable data points for patient so that the AI can function effectively?
Yeah, so great question. Let me try to simplify the answer. Uh, I'll start with actually a practical example. When I was working in an AI startup here in Israel that uses genetic algorithms to develop sort of autonomously evolving AI solutions, something very advanced for the medical space, we worked with a company that was acquired by Johnson and Johnson, and what they do is basically help in the clinical decision-making space surgeons to actually use a specific device during a cardiac intervention or surgery. Now, the reason I mentioned that is part of the challenge was they actually had so much data. They had a cube of like 6 dimensions with data from data from past interventions that the patient may have gone through, data about their medical history, data about their genetics, and the list could go on and on and on. And the real question is, which is an ideal world, I have so much data, but how do I actually organize the data and understand where there is causality, where there is just correlation, what data is relevant or not? So we used genetic algorithms to compute that. But in a real world, you need to make sure that you have data that's collected, not just ethically, but it's accurate, obviously, it's complete, and it's standardized. Now, those 3 words already make it the process very complex. A lot of that can be automated if you use devices. For example, you can actually sort of automate and do some QA on the data itself. And then bear in mind that so far we tend to use structured data, right? So if I take my medical records, it's usually I'm going to have some data structured in a certain way. I can have it in a database, for example. It could be also patient-reported data. I could say, hey, yes, I did take the medication, or I did feel this or that this week. Bear in mind all this information. You need to make sure it's properly recorded, and checked for forgetfulness or things like that. That said, again, nowadays we actually can use a lot of unstructured data, right? A lot of the data that we have is just one dimension, structured data. When you now talk to a patient, not just the words that are recorded, for example, in an audio transcript, but maybe the body language, maybe other things, the temperature, the tone of the voice. There's many other things that could be kind of indicators of something else going on. So today we have this multi-model thing you can use, where you can basically use AI to decipher not just the analysis of the numbers, what's your blood pressure, what's your height, what's your weight, results from blood tests or other things, but you can also use videos, audios, given that you have the consent, so we'll talk about that later, to also gauge different things. There are tests that through your voice, they claim they can actually diagnose certain things. So there's quite a lot of data that goes beyond the traditional sets that we have. But just to step back in a minute, if you go back to the more traditional route, we're talking here about electronic health records, which have become a big area of research. You have their medical history, diagnosis, treatments, medications, test results, a whole collection of information. The challenge sometimes is, what are you missing when you only look at that data, right? And it's collected in a certain format for clinical purposes. So, it's a good data set, but there are things that you're still missing. We talked about medical imaging, of course, X-ray, CT scans, all that. I talked a little bit, not too much, about the genomic data, as you asked me, like genetic markers, gene expressions, genomic sequences. So all that data could be used for a lot of different things. We have now wearable data, right? So I have my little watch here who collects my heart rates and all kinds of things when I'm at the gym, for example. So you can use that as well. And like I said, we have patient-reported outcomes, which are important about their quality of life or specific satisfaction or dissatisfaction with the treatment, as well as administrative claims data, everything you have from insurance, procedure code, diagnosis codes. So those are kind of the more standard ones. And then finally, last but not least, there are some data around social determinants of health, and this may evolve over time, right? So that means what portions of the population are most acceptable to specific conditions or to be accepting or not certain treatments. So does that depend on income, education, access to healthcare? So there's a lot of data there that we sometimes use if we have clinical trial data, and then some additional standardized clinical data. So it's quite a lot. As I said, these are more just the standard ones, but there's quite a lot of things that we are starting to explore, which go beyond this standard kind of sets of structured data.
So you have already explained that how this data is collected. There are so many different ways that data is collected and utilized by AI. And you also mentioned wearable. So if the data is being provided to AI from a standard system like an X-ray or CT scan, then it is fairly accurate. However, when it is being provided to AI from a wearable standpoint, what I know is that the wearable data is not very accurate. Um it is riddled with errors, and unless you have the very strong sensors in your wearable, the data may be not very accurate, even simple data like your heart rate, etc. That is why doctor says that, hey, I don't want to follow this data, please get record maintained. So today doctor have more faith in actual manual record rather than using the wearable data. So, are we going to see any change in that? Because I think if it is, if the data is coming from wearable, it will be a lot easier for patient to basically monitor their own health, and also for the doctor. Are we going to see any changes in that area?
Yes. So again, back to where I was, why I was part of Microsoft research on that space, and a lot has happened since then. The idea was, and this is, if you look at the latest literature, that's the direction we're going. I mean, medicine is also evolving, right? So we're not just talking about chronic disease management and other matters that are, let's say, very consuming of resources, and that's why we put a lot of attention to them. But if we think in a more holistic way, we need to think about today the big word is longevity, but at that time we used to call it health and wellness, right? So some of the data, the question is also what data to use and when and what for, right? As you say, we won't have a perfect data set, and you don't need to use all the data. So that's part of the complexity. If I'm gonna just do an exam and I want to find ways to, let's say, lose weight, sleep better at night, avoid certain conditions which I'm more prone to given genetics or other things, maybe some of the data is around wellness. It's how well do you sleep or exercise, and there's certain things about nutrition that you can use. They're not necessarily related to a disease. Now, when we go into acute care and you actually go into an intervention in a surgical procedure, that's a different story. So the question is, How do you combine all the data? One of the challenges we have, and one reason why some countries are better than others at healthcare innovation is, for example, in Israel, you have 5 HMOs, and there is a whole initiative that's given all the privacy and safety concerns, it still allows that data to be sort of shared across different providers, for example. So we may not have a 360 view, but you have actually a good set of data from the patients. While in other places the system is so broken down into silos that a physician that's maybe like a dermatologist may not have access to some portion of your health history that could be relevant to that, and he's not aware of. So again, it's a very complex and broken model that we have today, which is why AI is gonna evolve, not just work if I have the perfect data set, because I won't have, but maybe do certain things that actually, even in the absence of this perfection, do some sort of check and balances and validations, and eventually fine tune these models to kind of improve their accuracy and their effectiveness over time, and also be more personalized.
So we were talking about sharing of data and different. We actually touched upon the ethical sharing of patient data. Um, I think logically, if you look at it, there are various ways to share the data. One is that, and since we're talking about the personal level AI usage for each patient, because AI has the capability to make a personal plan for you, for me, and for everybody. At the same time, 99% of the humanity may suffer from one particular disease or one particular type of condition. So there is a need to share the individual data in some sort of central data bank, which is then further utilized by doctors, or you mentioned about the health authorities in different countries to come up with a country level plan or even a global plan. So while doing all this, first the data is being maintained at a local level, at my level, for example, for a patient, and then what kind of data is going to be shared with central agency, which is the central AI, and then will they display my condition? Will they display my patient ID? Will they display my name? All those kind of ethical considerations are also bugging us, making us more worried, what will happen, because if you look at the recent hacking trends, some bad guys are trying to hack the hospitals for whatever reasons. So if this is a situation today, what the ethical practices that will be followed with AI in near term and also in long term?
So big question. Maybe let me step back for 1 second. As you mentioned, some really critical things there, and I'll go maybe 30,000 feet high, and then maybe we can go back to the ground. One of the main difficulties, if you look on the AI for healthcare, is the fact that there are no standards, that it's hard to get access to data. There's many other challenges, but I'll leave it at there. And one of the main premises that sometimes are forgotten, there are a lot of books and movements around it, is the fact that who owns your health data, right? So intuition would say, well, if it's my health data, I own it, right? I'm the patient or the citizen, and this is my data. I decide if I want to share it with my personal trainer at the gym or not, if I want to share it with my friend who's a physician or not, if I want to share it with the hospital or not. There's some situations they would demand that, otherwise I can't go for a certain intervention. But in many cases, it should be my decision. Unfortunately, it's very complicated because based on the country that you are in, some of them have different policies. In the US, for example, you have the right to request access to your data, and they are obligated to give you legally. But actually, you have to request. So when I was at Microsoft, we launched a product called Microsoft Health Vault, and the idea was this is going to be my consumer health repository. This is my history, and I'm going to have it in the clouds, in a pen drive, whatever I choose to have it, and I would choose who has access, etc., etc. So I'm in charge of it. So it's a very strong principle called the patient-centered healthcare. which sounds kind of obvious, but unfortunately it doesn't work that way. You go to Canada, UK, countries where I worked at the time, there's still a little bit of resistance of having this data put out there. So it's a whole paradigm. Again, the going back to your question now, how do I use AI for that? It starts before AI, right? It starts with policies. The moment that I have a proper way, and maybe there are ways AI can help you with that, to actually collect all that information, store it securely, which is what we did in Health all the time, and decide who I want to share with, which systems, which departments, which individuals. That's a great start, right? Right now, data is scattered. There are myriad of regulations and rules and this and that, and the bureaucracy is incredible. So you might as well get away with just having partial data, which is not ideal. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's just kind of a broader picture of that challenge.
Yeah, I think some answers may take longer. Maybe the the development is not keeping up with the wish list of the people. For example, in India, also from where I belong, the patient data is all. You have to always opt in, and you have to say that, well, I'm sharing my data. For example, even if a cop stops you and show you breathalyzer just to check whether you are drunk or not, it is your choice. You can choose not to, use the breathalyzer that cop is trying to force you to test your breath. So I
Right.
think those things are already there from the legal standpoint. Um, but when we are using AI, whether my personal data will be used to do some other analysis, that I leave it to you. But then how my data is going to be without my name, for example. For instance, let me throw an example of the national ID system that we have in India. They are keeping the biometrics information. They keep the iris records and thumb impressions. In fact, all finger impressions. And they say, it's government of India. They say that it is 100% secure. Nobody is going to take your iris because it's so unique, and also your thumb impression. And that is how they are linking citizens on one-on-one basis using the iris, because very specific. So something like that they have built using some sort of encryption. So are we going to use some of these things in the future of AI, so that the patient data can be securely provided, and all the citizens of the country or the citizens of the world can get benefit of this extra data? Because AI has a learning curve. So if you teach AI more, the AI will be able to give you a better solution, isn't it? Don't you think that we should share the data with the AI global engine, so that the AI can help us in real sense? Your yes or no will do, or your few comments will do on this.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think you hit the. Obviously, it's more complex than it sounds, but you're 100% right. What I was going to say is, and I had this discussion an hour ago with a colleague in Brazil. We need to think globally, right? The fact that I'm Brazilian or Canadian or British doesn't really mean anything, right? Genetically, I am Eastern European. I happen to be born in Brazil. I lived in Israel. I lived in the U.S. So this is one of the problems, when you try and do that sort of data model that's sort of governed by a particular country, for example. Well, it doesn't quite work. I may be a citizen of the country and I may relocate to Singapore tomorrow. How do I put all my data there? How does a physician in Singapore access the data? So the reality is, we need to think globally. We need to think global health is a much more complex but a much more effective way to think about it. There is no global database, right? That is databases in the UK, in Brazil, in US, in India. But where's the global database? We don't know. We do have some clinical trials or specific projects that try to get a broader set of people, not to have it too skewed or biased. But in reality, we don't have that, right? So I definitely agree with you. There are different things evolving, and it's more around the architecture of those systems. That if you could have encryption, security, all the methods that you want, and have a federated model where now I really have kind of a global health model with policies and etc. that could be governed by different entities, governments, etc. That would definitely go a long ways. And I do think that eventually that's the way to go, right? We can't really put people in small boxes and say, hey, you belong to this box. People move around. People have mixed ethnicities. It's unavoidable. Eventually, you have to deal with it.
Well, in my opinion, I'm just making a comment here. During the COVID time, when the vaccines was under development, a lot of companies, a lot of countries came up with their own vaccine within matter of 6 months. And later,
Mhm.
we were told that a lot of AI was used to extrapolate different, models. So, did they share the data? I do not know. It's just a thought that I have. Otherwise, how they can different companies which are separate from each other, like US, UK, India, all these countries came up with their own vaccines within like 6 to 8 months. And in fact, India ran a world largest vaccination program. They vaccinated almost like 500 million or 600 million people in like 9 months. Um, so, how they came up with this vaccine and in such large number, how they were able to produce the vaccination for COVID? Just a thought. I'm not sure whether uh, there is a question around it, but it's just a thought which I'm sharing with you.
No, it's a very valid point. And by the way, I talked about it a few years ago. I was giving some sessions for executives in healthcare that came from all over the world to Israel. And this was around the time of COVID. As a matter of fact, during COVID, I spent 2.5 years as the chief partners officer for a company based out of Israel. We had some really interesting technologies that came from the Weizmann Institute of Science. At the time, they were using it for different projects around water, cosmetics, lots of different things. And during COVID, what they did is within a matter of months, literally, they took those technologies, what's called terahertz, a specific frequency, and they adapted the very sophisticated lasers and whatever systems to become like not a full-fledged test, diagnosis test for COVID, but kind of a screening test, like something that you could use quickly in an airport or before a stadium, which all shut down, and just say, look, 90% of people or more were not infected, right? So if you can at least say the ones who are negative and let them just go and board and whatever, and the ones you're not sure, then you could send to a test, which would take a longer time and more higher cost. That by itself had an incredible economic value. So the reason I'm mentioning that is because we collaborated with people all over the world. We're working with multinational corporations, you name it. And we actually did clinical trials in the Philippines, in Brazil, in Costa Rica, in República Dominicana, like so many different places, UK. And to be honest, I mean, I'm not the expert on the data analysis, but I don't think we saw completely different patterns. But the fact we collected from multiple places and collaborating with multidisciplinary teams all over the globe definitely allowed us to move a lot faster. We moved really, really fast. Again, this is another way to say the more we can collaborate across governments, across entities, across specialties, the faster it will evolve. And that's what we see now in the AI in healthcare research. People are doing more. I'm not looking just at cardiology or just at this or that. Like there's a lot of cross function, cross multidisciplinary studies, and this is the way we're going to have to take it to make a big outcome out of it.
So, Benny, before I ask you next question, I would like to share some information with you, which is regarding India. During the COVID time, there was a application launched by the government of India, and if you remember that era, like 4 to 5 years back, there used to be super spreaders. I mean, we used to hear about the super spreader, but then how do you identify the super spreader? You can't tell a name like you are the super spreader, XYZ. So the government of India came up with an application. I'm not sure whether they used AI, but it was a very good application, very simple to use. Download it on your mobile, and the app will tell you that you came like 5 feet away from the infected person.
Mm-hmm.
How did they came to know about that? It's a mystery. Because if I came close to an infected person, that means I'm also infected. So if somebody else subsequently check, and they will show me as also as infected person. If I go somewhere and there are 10 people there, all those guys will get an alert that you are in the vicinity of infected person.
Correct.
And however, even this application was opt-in. You have to say that you want to give your location to
Yes.
the government.
So I'm familiar with that. I mean, I didn't know you had it in India, but we had a similar, very similar application like that here in Israel. I can't remember if it was built by the Ministry of Health or some other entity, but it doesn't really matter. I do recall during that period that it was optional. They would encourage us to use it, but you could decide because you have to share your location and you don't have to. But I actually use it with my family, and if you go to the supermarket and you realize somebody was just there exactly at that cashier, 3 minutes before you, and they were infected, probably you may not want to go and use that device, put your fingers there, or you're going to put gloves or whatever it is you're going to do, right? So you probably want to know that. Now, again, to step back, how they know that? I mean, that part is relatively simple, because if you allow geolocation and you can easily track those kinds of things. The real question is, what is the likelihood? Because I could easily just avoid going to all those places where somebody infected came up. But in the circumstances that I really need to go there, what's the probability of me getting infected? That's a different question, right? Is it 1% or 99%? That would probably give me a different result and outcome. So there's a lot of things you can do with AI for that. But again, I want to take one step back. While that's very interesting, let's look at the bigger picture. The even more interesting thing, which we are getting close to with the advancements in AI, is all those things require a lot of modeling. These models are not deterministic, right? I can't tell you for sure if they're all probabilistic models, right? And they may improve over time, but they also may have some flaws. So they help. Now, one of the challenges with that is that it takes a long time for you to get to a point that the systems, will be able to be used for certain purposes. For example, if it's just a personal decision, it's okay. If it's something that requires, a regulatory body to approve, you have to have some levels of accuracy that are higher standards by the FDA or Anvisa or whatever it is. And we went through that. So what I'm trying to say is the whole process of scientific discovery, the whole process, you have to create hypotheses, you have to collect data, you have to create those models, you need to test, validate them, and then you find, whoops, it actually doesn't hit. And we went to them many times. The standards, I want to have, a false positive or false negative, a sensitivity, specificity, whatever, XYZ. It's not there yet. What do? Basically, you go back to the whiteboard and you start all over again, right? So this process, you use it for clinical trials, for drug discovery. It's something that can be revolutionized with AI, so that, as I said before, there are different ways to do that is going to shortcut some of these challenges, that's going to get to you faster. If you're going to fail fast, don't wait 10 years, just fail immediately. And if you're going to succeed, really do it and prioritize your resources. So that's probably the most interesting area for AI, which is really like creating a better portfolio of where you're going to invest and how do you get the maximum ROI, return on investment. That's to me the most exciting area, and we're seeing some great progress there.
Great. In fact, my worry was, they are telling me that I'm in the close vicinity of an infected person or a super spreader, but what kind of data the government was capturing using that app? And that is something which is, up for speculation. I'm sure they must be having some super computer capturing all the data, especially in a large country like India with 140 billion people. I think it must be something great running there. This brings us to the last question, and which is about the strategies and policies that can be implemented for successful implementation of innovative AI in healthcare. So, if you can just cover a couple of strategies and policies that, from your research point of view, doctors and the health institutions must follow.
Yeah, and before I do that, maybe add just 5 seconds addition to what you just said before. Um, I don't know exactly how those applications you mentioned were developed, but it goes back to what we said in the beginning, right? There is a trade-off in AI in healthcare, which is the more stringent you are in providing access to data, et cetera, the higher your, let's say, confidence that you have perhaps, hopefully, lower risks, which may not be the case, but psychologically, yes. Um, and the higher the level of trust and sharing in a responsible environment, the higher the levels of innovation. So it could be that the data came from self-reporting, right? I went to the doctor and he told me I'm infected. So I decided for goodwill to protect other citizens and report that I was there at that time. Now, how reliable is that information? Do I remember exactly what time I was there? Do I actually have the ability to go through this process after a few hours? So there's a lot of questions there. It could be that it's that I share more data. I let the system track me wherever I am. So now I'm giving a higher consent of I give up a little bit of my privacy in pro of a better outcome. So again, all those things are trade-offs. I don't know exactly how it was done, but my only point is the more you allow transparency and sharing, again, within the constraints of having the right consent forms and the very transparent communications, the better your results. Now, going back to your original question, what strategies and policies can be implemented in healthcare? Um, we talked about a few of them, but let's focus on sort of how do you minimize the potential risks of not having great results, right? Which is a big concern. First of all, we talked about the data collection. We just talked about it, right? How do I collect it? Is this, you mentioned some examples. Is this device accurate or not? Do I want to take this data into consideration? Do I want to do some data cleaning? Data scientists spend a big chunk of their time, sometimes more than half, just cleaning the data, right? Because if you take the data as it is and has noise and it has lots of irregularities, and I'm going to take this data and train a model based on that, probably I'm not going to get great results. So the fact that I take the time to actually make sense of the data, organize it better, get rid of defective signals or whatever, all this process needs to be done in a proper way to guarantee that. And of course, if I only collected data of male Brazilian guys who are 1 meter and 80 centimeters high and who came from Eastern Europe, maybe the data set doesn't have a representation of women or people from Asia or you name it. So making sure that you can actually either include some underrepresented communities, which is not always possible, or, which is one of the things that I'm exploring in my research now, create some synthetic data that is kind of validated. It's not real world data, but it will serve the purpose of making your data sets usable for research, training, etc. So that's one of them. The second is algorithm development evaluation. Of course, we have algorithms that were created by humans. Eventually, Mark Zuckerberg says they will be created by AI as well, and the 25% of Google code is created by AI. So whether you created it manually or through AI, you want to evaluate. You're going to have some clear criteria to make sure that these AI systems will have a focus on fairness, on equity, and better healthcare outcomes, right? Transparency and accountability. I think we talked about it, right? I can't give you a black box and expect you to trust it. So how do I actually show you how I got to that outcome is very important. And in most cases, you're going to have some set level of human oversight, right? You're going to have what we call the man in the loop or the woman in the loop who will sort of validate some sensitive stuff. Inclusiveness, I mentioned the data, but inclusiveness can mean, as I said, working in multidisciplinary teams. If I only look at oncologist outcomes, as I was doing in my research initially, is there representative of all physicians? Shall I go talk to dermatologists? Shall I go talk to primary care physicians, which is where I'm going right now, right? So foster the collaboration of different kind of healthcare providers, AI developers, and by the way, there's a new role called ethicist. You have to have those part of the team as well. For people worried about jobs disappearing, many jobs will also be in high demand. That's just one of them. So there's on and on. There's regulatory frameworks, governance, all kinds of things. I'm not going to go through that right now. But I want to mention one that's kind of obvious and sometimes forgotten, which is education and training, right? To give you a parallel, in the education space here in Israel, they had a chief scientist of Microsoft just announced a program where high-tech people are going to teach teachers in the Ministry of Education AI, because they need to embrace AI. And the same needs to happen in medicine. The more you train doctors and nurses on AI, and I've done that, they are, wow, they go anywhere from amazed to super concerned. What's my life gonna look like? Will I have a job? I mean, hopefully most of them will have a job, but they also need to learn how to use AI, right? So the education training also for patients. If I don't know what you're gonna do with my data, I don't know how to answer the consent form, I'm not gonna use it. I'm gonna report it, right? So again, there is lots of things, access, funding, but I think we covered most of them. We want to incent people, whether it's through education, whether it's through financial incentives, to do the right thing, to pursue the path that will lead to the better outcomes. And it only happens with education. That's why education and health are probably, in my opinion, the most important drivers here.
So, Benny, we learned a lot today while talking to you, and you have shared your research topics pretty well, especially for our viewers. And so, thank you so much for finding time and joining us live today, um, because your research is very valuable for, especially for the healthcare workers like doctor, nurses, etc. So, if any medical healthcare staff watching our live stream, and if you have a question, please do not hesitate to write back to us. So, with this, Benny, I will like to say goodbye for today, only to catch you in the next one.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate the time. And as you say, any medical professionals interested in engaging the research, you can write to me, benyr@ua.pt. Thank you very, very much, and stay healthy.
Thank you so much, Benny, and bye for now. So, friends, we had a fantastic discussion with Benny today, and he shared a lot of knowledge, lot of research that he has done personally, and his experience while working with a lot of healthcare workers, not only in Israel but also in different countries. And therefore, his knowledge is definitely very useful. So, just in case if you have any questions, especially with regard to your job, or if you are a patient, if you want to know more, you can reach out to us. We will make the connection happen with Benny, or you can reach out to him directly. His coordinates are given below in the description. So, friends, thanks for joining me live today, and I will catch you again in the next one. Bye for now.